to do this. So it's something I wanted to do with my students for a long time. So
Mm-hmm.
could you tell us, just as an introduction, but I'll also be posting something about your work online, but could you tell us something about yourself and the kind of work you do as a feminist, especially, Sangram, and your involvement in grassroots activism?
Okay, I just hope this video, I mean, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, you're coming on
Okay.
clear.
Yeah, so it's your, I mean, I'm hearing you in this broken way, but maybe you can hear me clearly, which is good.
Okay.
Okay, to start, this was, I mean, I've been part of the women's movement in India for a long time now. I think it's been about 30 years easily.
Mhm.
And this movement is part of what is known as the autonomous women's movement in India, where it does not attach itself to any political party, and we do various things, and but I mean with various different movements. And so some of us work with rural women, some of us work with migration, some of us work with even media, some of us work with I work with sex workers or rural women. So we are all a bunch of people who sort of believe in one ideology of feminism, I would say.
Mhm.
But we don't all do the same work. And we are also placed all over India. We are not in one place. So
Okay.
that's the way it works. And we're now linked through listservs and things like that. But earlier, in those earlier days, we used to actually meet physically, and we used to have like 3 or 4 days meetings,
Wow.
where we would have discussions on various issues, theme based. And and we used to call them the autonomous women's movement meetings. And they used to happen I mean, they've happened in various places in the country.
Mhm.
So that's the way it is. Essentially, we also came together because of various incidents that happened in this country, and there was this organic response to it. So there was this the Mathura case, which is very well known.
Mhm.
And so there were cases of rape, there were cases of bride burning because of dowry, there were cases of that sort of brought the feminists together.
Mhm.
And uh, and the women's rights movement like actually can be traced on these various incidents that took place that then helped us consolidate our negotiation with the state, talking among ourselves. Some of us work specifically with tribal communities. So, the tribal communities and their issues, slum dwellers and their issues.
Mhm.
Um, so, it's essentially many, many kinds of movements that
Mhm.
come together under the umbrella of the autonomous women's movement.
Oh, that's terrific. And I also read on your website, and of course know from uh, the various initiatives you spearhead that you're also part of international networks. And I
Yeah.
think,
So now this is about me. I mean, okay, the autonomous women movement is what I was talking about.
okay,
Now, when you're talking about, the kind of work I've been doing,
yes,
that it's been essentially working with sex workers. We
yes.
started because of the HIV/AIDS more, epidemic that had reached rural India. We were placed in rural India,
Mhm.
and as a response to the epidemic, we jumped in, and Government of India places its entire HIV work on what is known as targeted interventions.
Okay.
And unfortunately, instead of targeting HIV. It started targeting populations, and one of the populations that got targeted, still is targeted, are the sex workers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we started working. We work with um, female sex workers, we work with male sex workers, we work with transgender people who are in sex work. So over the years, we've evolved. We started working with female sex workers, and then over the years, we've evolved. We've included men and transgender sex workers as they approached us. And
Mm-hmm.
the way Sangram, the organization, works is that it sort of helps build collectives of people,
Okay.
uh, because people have to have their own voice,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to fight back. So that's the way we uh, work. So we started working with female sex workers. There, a collective of female sex workers was formed, which is called Veshya Anyay Mukti Parishad, which
Mm-hmm.
is Veshya is prostitutes for in Sanskrit. And so Anyay Mukti is freedom from injustice, and Parishad is a group of people coming together. So, and it's called VAMP, and pun is totally intended. So VAMP got formed, and VAMP got formed, I think, in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. And in 2000, a group of young men approached us and said, "Listen, we are also in sex work, and we are, men who service other men."
That's very
So,
interesting.
pardon me?
That's very interesting, because when I guess when people, I'm guessing also my students think about sex workers collectives and even feminists working in sex workers collectives, that it would be mostly women, maybe transgendered women, but not the
Men.
men necessarily,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But men approached us. This was in 2000, and so then we started collectivizing men in sex work under an umbrella organization called Muskan, which actually means to be gay in
Okay.
Marathi. And the transgender and the men who service men are sort of together in Muskan. They sort of function together in
Mhm.
this organization, this collective called Muskan. And so we are a group that actually believes in collectivization as a way to negotiate with the state, to negotiate with society also, because with sex workers, the negotiation is both with state and society. You have to fight both,
Yes.
because you can be, I mean, societal norms, society's way of marginalizing sex workers because of the work they do, invariably means that access to healthcare gets impacted, access to going to the local market gets impacted. Just generally way of life gets impacted.
Yes.
So so you're negotiating with the state, you're negotiating with society, and so it's essentially a struggle of being discriminated and stigmatized by both.
Hmm.
And this stigma can be extremely debilitating and depressing. So, what the collective does actually is that it helps to and it supports people with an ability to come together, to voice their concerns, to voice their anger, to voice their helplessness,
Hmm.
and to do a collective negotiation.
Yes.
So that actually is the crux of it.
Wow. So, one of the things I thought would be interesting to talk about on the topic of sex work, and especially, the connection with international work, or the term itself actually is transnational work.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually regarding the idea of, what you were mentioning as an approach by sex workers, this collective uh,
See, the whole thing
organization,
is,
right?
yeah.
So
I
how does
think what
the
happens,
transnational fit into it?
part of it coming in. Yeah, see, no, actually, we worked for almost like 10 or 12 years on the ground
Oh,
before
okay.
we even looked up,
Oh,
right?
right. Of course.
So, so it's only when we'd already done like a critical amount of work at the grassroots
Hmm.
that the ideology of the organization was that the grassroots work should impact or inform policy.
Okay.
And the only way you can actually do that is to start, forming networks of people in different areas, in different geographical areas within the country. So the first thing was transnational in terms of, because we're such a huge nation,
Oh, yes,
you
of
know.
course.
So can you imagine? None of us speak the same languages. None of us speak the
Oh,
same. I mean, it's a nightmare. Any meeting with us is a nightmare. There are translations. I mean, I tell you, the amount of time we spend in translation is unbelievable.
yeah.
So, so the national network of sex workers got first formulated.
Yes.
And then, because of UNAIDS, frankly, because UNAIDS sort of reached out to us during all these various AIDS conferences, that we started meeting other sex worker groups
Okay.
in the region and globally.
Hmm.
And when we started meeting, we exchanged notes and said, and it's also very, very interesting to see that violence against sex workers, within sex work and against sex workers by society and the state, the stories are so similar. I mean, you
Oh.
may be talking to, white women in sex work, you may be talking to brown women in sex work, or Asian women in sex work.
Um,
You may be talking about, colored women from anywhere,
um,
from the States, women of color. You could be talking to African sex workers, but almost everywhere, the narrative of the kind of violence that is meted out to sex workers is so, I mean, there is something so strange because of its, the nature is so similar,
mm-hmm.
and so everywhere you go for these meetings, you would meet other women who were telling you the same story that you had, essentially,
Yeah.
and that was, I think, very critical in bonding, in helping to bond.
Okay.
And almost across the board, the policies also were similar. They were very discriminatory policies. Nobody was willing to accept that sex workers work, you
Mm.
know. And even within the HIV world, even within the feminist world, in fact, the feminists were the most difficult to, talk to and engage with.
Oh,
And
now that's interesting.
yes, because their understanding that sex work itself is violence,
Yes.
you know, sort of blinded them to the violence that happened within sex work and what the sex workers were actually fighting. So their understanding, I mean, if you talk to sex workers, they will always say that the client is the least of their concerns, in terms of violence. They're
Yes.
like, we can deal with the clients, we can handle them. It's the police, it's law enforcement, it's petty political gangs or criminal gangs who are like sort of organized crime that have a much larger impact
Mm-hmm.
on sex workers. And this happens like you talk to the Asia Pacific Network of Sex Workers, you talk to the Global Network of Sex Work,
Mm-hmm.
sex workers, the NSWP. You talk to sex workers from any of these regions. You talk to the African Sex Workers Alliance, which is a huge alliance, ASWA.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere, the language of discrimination, the manner in which violence is meted out is almost similar.
Wow.
So obviously the ability to bond on this, has been very, very effective and useful.
Well,
Um,
one of the things I thought was a game changer, because of the involvement of organizations from the grassroots, like the collectives you work with, is that the transfer of knowledge seems to be happening, in a different direction now, right? So it's not just in the old days, feminist organizations, uh, not even grassroots, coming from the first world, would teach about sex work, organizing, or feminist analysis of sex work. But now
May I interrupt here?
it,
May
it's
I interrupt?
the reverse.
Yeah. No, it's not yet over. You
Yeah,
know,
definitely, definitely.
it's an uphill task. It's an uphill fight. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry. I mean, you may have in your class a lot of people who deeply believe in Gloria Steinem. But my
Yes,
God, the
talk about.
problem that woman has created for the Indian sex workers is
Uh-huh.
unbelievable. Because this thing of, talking down
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to the subaltern is so much a part of the rhetoric and the practice
Mm-hmm.
that they find it very difficult, I think, to accept that there is a voice that is wanting to break through,
Yes,
and that it actually has a voice, you know.
yes.
But somehow, I don't know, but I'm so tired of this top down approach and talking down to us
Mm.
approach, which just because we are poor or poverty stricken or, whatever, or from rural India, it does not mean that we get talked down to. And this is very, very apparent in the understanding of our so called pain, our so called victimhood, our so called everything.
Yes.
And I think that there is a tremendous now anger in the sex workers movement
Mm-hmm.
against, the feminist, because they're seeing the feminists as people who are enemies. And I feel terrible because I come from the feminist movement.
Yes.
And I have to keep sort of, saying that it's feminist theory and practice that has the best analysis
Mm-hmm.
for sex workers, and we must tap into it. They
Mm-hmm.
should be our best allies. They understand issues of consent,
Yes.
much, 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 much more. And so, mainly, my life has been trying to bridge this gap
Okay.
and trying to bridge the gap between the feminists,
Mm-hmm.
feminist theory practice, and the sex workers' rights movement. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the fear of the feminist is now receding, which is what you're seeing as the difference.
Okay.
Because earlier, sex workers used to get so intimidated
Yes.
by the feminist argument
Mm-hmm.
that sex work is violence against all women, and that people in sex work were these terrible, indecent, immoral group from one kind of, I wouldn't call them feminists, but at least right wing thinkers,
Mm-hmm.
and the feminists joining them as far as sex work is concerned. In every other sphere, they would say we don't want to talk to the right wing understandings of women and what women should be and how they should be. But where sex work is concerned, they sort of made these strange bedfellows.
Yes.
And I think that's been our fight, for years now, for years now. But I think also we must, to be very, very frank and to be very true, feminism is not a monolithical, homogeneous
Yes.
space. There are feminisms within feminisms. And that diversity is where, which actually helps the understanding and the theory and the practice. So I think we have tried our level best to sort of bridge this and see if, because sometimes I feel that the sex workers I work with are really people who practice feminism in their everyday lives.
Mm-hmm.
In the way they deal with that their negotiation with their male clients, their negotiation with the state, the struggles of this, of fighting back stigma, discrimination. I think the sex workers movement has tremendous amount of knowledge to be actually given
Yeah.
to feminists. So from both sides, there is a need to have a dialogue, and this the Gloria Steinem's kind of top-down approach, which is so sad for a feminist. I mean, I thought we feminists fought that all our lives, of telling us what to think about or what we should think about sex work is a scary space. And I think we should, we have fought it, we will continue to fight it.
Yes. Well, it's very good you mentioned Gloria Steinem because, she's somebody that I guess in popular culture my students would be aware of, and she's doing it in her own context. So she's this time, I
Yeah,
don't know if you heard the news. I'm sure you have.
I have. I've been following it.
She's telling the young
I
feminists in the
know.
US.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. But that's exactly the point. That you sort of have gone so far into believing, that you can also say whatever you want,
Mhm.
and that to be accepted as, you know, the goddess's last words is not going to be part of our realities any longer. We
Yeah.
will not accept this, and um, you know, um, I think I'm happy it happened with Bernie Sanders, because when we were saying this from the sex workers' rights movement, nobody was willing to listen to us.
Uh-huh.
Right now that it's happened in a really mainstream space,
Uh-huh.
now you sort of get an understanding of the feeling of despair we've had in our interactions with feminists like Gloria.
Yes. Definitely. That's very interesting. Now they know what you've been telling them all
We've
along.
been for years.
That we should write that down, we told you so.
Absolutely.
And well, that can foster another level of transnational solidarity.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, but also this, of what feminism means and what feminism is, cannot be defined by a few.
Yes.
I have argued this forever. I said, hundreds and thousands of sex workers in India, not one or two, telling you a different story. You should
Hmm.
have the strength to listen to it.
Yes.
You can't keep on to your own rhetoric and your own theories and say you have to believe this theory. Because
Hmm.
I'm telling you, when they are talking about life's experiences that are challenging your theory. And
Hmm.
what is the point of feminism if it cannot be inclusive,
Yes.
you know, to all the various struggles that women face in their everyday lives,
Hmm.
whether
And
in sex work or not?
yeah, and I think it gets very tricky, especially for a young feminist, I would imagine, if it's their first time to hear about other voices, right?
Mm, mm,
In feminism as well. So one of the things the sex workers movements have been very, very good in pointing out to societies is that criminal approaches, right, just don't work. And for the longest time, this is a part, of the huge debate. On one hand, it sort of narrowed down the way sex work is being talked about. On the other hand, it is a thing that just won't go away because it's state presence, right? It's police impacting on the lives of women. And I thought, maybe I could
it,
ask you about your initiatives in dealing with police-led responses. Because in Canada, they decriminalized, but they fortified the
I
aspect of
know, I know.
criminalization, right?
I know.
So,
I followed that too. Yeah. No,
mhm,
actually, the point is that for the sex worker, the first thing that she has to deal with, other than the clients, is law enforcement.
mhm,
And police can be extremely brutal. in their policing, because very often, like in India, sex work per se is not illegal. Everything
Mm.
around it is. So soliciting a client is illegal. Living off the earnings of a woman in sex work is illegal. But sex work per se is not illegal. But the police are totally buying into this rhetoric of society, the moralistic rhetoric of society, and therefore they are not doing legal policing, they're doing moral policing,
Yes.
in their legal role.
Yes.
And what is happening is that a lot of them pick up women and are not able to book them under the offenses that they're supposed to be booked at. So, you'll get vagrancy, that they were loitering around. I mean, silly offenses very
Yes.
often. Because the police really just are picking them up because they're so angry at them for being on the streets. And that anger sort of translates into wanting to beat them up, wanting to treat them badly, wanting to to violate their rights, take them to the police station and keep them sitting for hours, deny them all their basic rights. This has been the actions of the police. So our action first was like, okay, this is the law. This
Mm-hmm.
is what a police person can do. This is what a police person cannot do.
Yes.
And just doing that legal information led to a lot of reduction in violence, because women then started saying, but on what grounds are you picking me up? What have I done? And just talking back, asking those questions. If somebody gets picked up, going in large numbers to the police station, to pressurize the police to tell us what the reason for the pickup is, or the raid is, has actually helped a lot. So on the ground, we've been doing that, and at the level of the nation and the state of Maharashtra, we've been advocating with police,
Mm-hmm.
with the ministers and with the elected bodies, policymakers, saying that this kind of attitude of the police is just not acceptable. You win some, you lose some.
Yes.
That's the other problem. It's like you're sitting on a seesaw. Today in India, I think we're on a low, a real low, because the abolitionists, the anti-sex work lobbies,
Mm-hmm.
the anti-porn lobbies have all come together under the name of the anti-trafficking network,
Oh,
and
yes.
are able to access a lot of money and influence state policy and the law in many cases. So this is something that is where we are actually looking for allies, and we have a lot of them in the feminist movement in the country.
Okay.
So we've built that. We've been able to build that bridge with feminists, and so there are some feminist lawyers who are helping us look into this situation, and hopefully we can try and intervene. But it looks really, really, in today's political climate in India, it looks very, very sorry. The situation is not so good, because we have now right-wing vigilantes who are, who are influencing the police and using the police against people who are in sex work. So that is a big worry at this point in time.
So
And
that's very interesting because a lot of what we talk about in class, about my class on gender and law, for example, is about how the enforcement of law is not separate from the context, right? So
yeah,
during a period of really, really, uh, difficult political processes, and where you have very anti-sex work, or very conservative forces in power, it happens.
yes,
It These things happen. You see a spike in law enforcement as well,
yeah,
and it seems that sex work is a favorite, right? So sex work is a favorite issue to be to be focused on. So it
yes.
also
It's
happens
also an
here, right?
easy. it's an easy issue, right? Because the people who are going to fight back are sex workers, who mainly, mostly, large percentage of them women, and women who
Mhm.
come from the lower caste and the lower class in this country, and so don't have a voice because of that.
Yes.
And then the sex work is the added layer.
Mhm.
So that and we don't have an issue so much. I mean, the police are a problem, but here we also have a problem of the vigilante groups, which are policing sex workers, emboldened by a right wing ideology that is being proposed by the state. And so that, I think, is the problem. So like I keep saying, that the violence is from state and societal actors. It is not just not just fighting the state,
Mhm.
where
So it's
certain rules and regulations and all that can be argued.
mhm.
Whereas with the vigilante groups, it's a free for all.
Yes. So Mina, I don't want to uh, you know, keep you on. I know you have stuff to do, but as a parting shot, I was interested in maybe asking you to give my students, many of them also young feminist advocates and scholars, who want to continue working in the field of, NGOs, or maybe that's related to their studies in women's studies courses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would you tell them, in terms of becoming a feminist today, especially in terms of their attitudes, towards uh, feminists not from Canada, right? Uh, what should they
Yeah.
bring in terms of an attitude?
I think one thing that we really need to address is this understanding that feminism is anti-men. you know
Hmm.
I feel young people today really should understand that feminists are fighting for equality, and a lot of us are also fighting for equity, and we cannot make this huge a space of knowledge that we've all contributed to over the years into something so simplistic as anti men or anti any particular kind of group. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is that when you're talking about feminists from the developed countries and their understandings of what is happening in the developing countries, I know a lot of feminists who come from the white world. I call the white world, developed world,
Yeah.
even if they're women of color from there.
Yeah.
Their understanding of the male psyche in the other countries is so negative,
Yes.
because they only see the highlighted cases, right? So you get to see the huge rape case or the huge whatever, the case of the Khap panchayats, maybe in who are restricting movement of women and stuff in the country. You hear them, you read about them in the papers, and you think that's what India is all about.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at transnationalism and feminisms and understanding of these feminisms, I definitely would advise, uh, please don't do what Gloria Steinem has done. Don't come down there. Don't assume, never assume anything.
Yes.
Come, learn, let's work together, to build a better world for all women, whether they are in the developed world or in the developing world. But don't assume that, we are poor victims of either our circumstances or, poverty. We are not. We are fighters, we are fighting back, we struggle with our realities, and I don't think we can ever be slaughtered as victims.
Yes. Very well said. And thank you very much for that, Mina.